Joshua, chapter 5, starting in verse 10. While the sons of Israel camped at Gilgal, they observed the Passover on the evening of the 14th day of the month on the desert plains of Jericho. On the day after the Passover, on the very day, they ate some of the produce of the land, unleavened cakes and parched grain. The manna ceased on the day after they had eaten some of the produce of the land, so that the sons of Israel no longer had manna, but they ate some of the yield of the land of Canaan during that year. Now it came about, when Joshua was by Jericho, that he lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, a man was standing opposite him with his sword drawn in his hand. And Joshua went to him and said to him, "Are you for us, or for our adversaries?" And he said, "No. Rather I indeed come now as captain of the host of the Lord." And Joshua fell on his face to the earth, and bowed down, and said to him, "What has my Lord to say to his servant?" The captain of the Lord's host said to Joshua, "Remove your sandals from your feet, for the place where you are standing is holy." And Joshua did so. What's going on in these verses? Yesterday we reflected on the Lord as covenant keeper. And so we talked about and we reflected on the idea that God was reestablishing the covenant with his people. That after reestablishing the covenant with his people went and they kept the Passover. We talked about and reflected on the new covenant in Jesus. Right after the events of circumcising the nation, reestablishing the covenant, they celebrate the Passover, a reminder that God brought them out of the land of Egypt, which should also bring them to a reminder of Moses and the mountain and the 10 Commandments. For it was there that God says, "I am the Lord your God who led you out of the land of Egypt. You shall have no other gods before me." And goes on to quote the rest of the 10. Here, it says, "Now it came about when Joshua was by Jericho." He's by Jericho because they're about to fight a battle. He's by Jericho because this is the first battle that will be fought in the promised land. This is the first battle that will be waged in the land of promise. That he lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, a man was standing opposite him with his sword drawn in his hand. This is a warrior. And Joshua went to him and said, "Are you for us or for our adversaries?" Why would Joshua have that mentality? Because he's about to fight a battle against this city. And there's a man with a sword drawn standing opposite him. And he wants to know, are you on my side or are you on their side? He said, "No, I'm not on your side and I'm not on their side. Rather, I indeed come now as captain of the host of the Lord. I'm on the Lord's side. I am subservient to the Lord." And it's interesting because for him to have said, "I'm with you, Joshua," would mean that I'm subservient to you. I'm under you. For him to have said, "I'm with your enemies," means I'm under them. He said, "No, I'm under the Lord." And Joshua fell on his face to the earth and bowed down and said to him, "What has my Lord to say to his servant?" So Joshua initially comes from the place of authority. Are you with me or are you with them? But when he finds out who's in front of him, he transitions to the place of servanthood. What has my Lord to say to his servant? Joshua has just joined himself, placed himself under the Lord of hosts. Because he is calling the captain of the host of the Lord his master by saying, "What has my Lord," lowercase l, to say to his servant? And this is what the captain of the Lord has to say. The captain of the Lord's host said to Joshua, "Remove your sandals from your feet, for the place where you are standing is holy." And Joshua did so. We don't have a record of the conversation that happened between Joshua and the captain of the Lord of hosts at this point. This morning, we learn something not so much about Joshua, but about God and his relationship to us. This story, the words of the Lord, the captain of the Lord of hosts, should be reminiscent of something to Joshua. And to be clear, we don't know who the captain of the host of the Lord is. I wouldn't be dogmatic about what I'm about to say, so if you take a different opinion than this, please do not be offended. Personally, I think this is Jesus, for several reasons. Jesus is the captain of the host of the Lord. And you could say it's Michael. The only difference is that Joshua bows down to him, and every time we see an angel interacting with someone and the people bow down to them, a sign of worship, a sign of submissiveness, the angels always rebuke them. The angels always say, no, get up. Do not worship me. The only time that we don't see this is with the angel of the Lord. And it's interesting because he says the place on which you stand, the place where you are standing is holy. So he receives the submissiveness of Joshua. And then he declares that the place where you are standing is holy. And why do I think this is probably God? This is probably Jesus. And why should this be something that is reminiscent to Joshua? Why should Joshua remember this? Well, if we go to Exodus 3:5, I'll start back in Exodus 3:1. This is why it should be very, very familiar to Joshua. Now Moses was pasturing the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the west side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. The angel of the Lord appeared to him in a blazing fire from the midst of a bush, and he looked, and behold, the bush was burning with fire, yet the bush was not consumed. So Moses said, I must turn aside now and see this marvelous sight, why the bush is not burned up. When the Lord saw that he turned aside to look, God called from him from the midst of the bush and said, Moses, Moses. And he said, Here I am. Now, did you notice? It says the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a blazing fire from the midst of the bush, but the voice is that of God. Verse 5, then he said, Do not come near here. Remove your sandals from your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground. And here's what's powerful for Joshua, because I have to imagine that he's heard the story from Moses. I have to imagine he's probably heard the story every Passover. I mean, can you imagine being at a Passover with Moses? He'd probably tell the whole story. And then God called to me from the bush, and he said, Moses, Moses. And I said, Here I am. And he said to me, Do not come near here. Remove your sandals from your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground. And here's the interesting thing. In our verses in Joshua, we don't know if there was a conversation between the captain of the Lord of hosts and between Joshua. We don't know what was said next, but we do know what was said next, and I wonder if it was the same thing. Not in the exact words, but in the content, in the sense of I'm with you. Because here's what God says. He said also, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. That's covenant language. Whenever you are reading the Bible and you hear the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, it's covenant language, because the covenant was given to Abraham, and then it was reaffirmed to Isaac, and then it was reaffirmed to Jacob. And then the people of Israel went into exile. They went into Egypt. So the covenant was reaffirmed to these three. This is covenant language. I am the God of your father. The God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. Then Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. The Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt, and have given heed to their cry because of their taskmasters, for I am aware of their suffering. So I have come down to deliver them from the power of the Egyptians. Who was in front of Joshua right now? The power of the Canaanites was in front of them. So I have come down to deliver them from the power of the Egyptians, and to bring them up from that land to a good and spacious land, to a land flowing with milk and honey, to the place. And what did they just do? They literally had just eaten of the fruit of the land. They literally stopped receiving manna because what? They had come to a good and spacious land, to a land flowing with milk and honey, to the land, and this says, to the place of the Canaanite and the Hittite and the Amorite and the Perizzite and the Hivite and the Jebusite. The conversation ends with one more verse. Now behold, the cry of the sons of Israel has come to me. Furthermore, I have seen the oppression with which the Egyptians are oppressing them. We don't know the conversation that happened between Joshua and the Lord, the captain of the hosts of the Lord. But I wonder if it was the same thing. And even if it wasn't, Joshua must have known the story. Joshua must have been suddenly remembering, this is the God of... Now, again, my stance is that this is Jesus, that this is actually God showing up. Maybe it's not. Either way, you can take it as, these are the same words that were spoken by God to Moses. And these are the words that were said when God said, I am the God of God of Abraham, the God of your father, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. These are the words of the Lord. And why was that important? You know, what's interesting, and my question this morning, my real reflection this morning, there's multiple things I reflected on. Why take off your sandals? And maybe that has something to do with the fact that you know, when we see in Luke that Jesus says that when Jesus is washing the disciples' feet, Peter says, wash my hands and my feet also, my hands and my head also. And Jesus says, anyone who's bathed is already clean, except for their feet. They need to wash their feet. But you are clean, except one amongst you is not clean. And because he knew he would betray him. So I'm wondering if the idea of the feet, the sandals the sandals were the thing. Sandals were just in contact with the world all the time, all day. Excuse me. The sandals were in contact with the world all time and all day. And so he's saying, take off that part of you that is so constantly connected to the world, that is so constantly connected to the things of this world, that is so constantly connected to the ground. I don't know, maybe. But the biggest revelation, the biggest reflection for me was, why did God appear as a burning bush to Moses? And whether it's God or it's the angel of the Lord or it's another angel, why a warrior? We know that either way, there's a declaration of the same words that God spoke to Moses. And either way, there's a declaration that the place on which you're standing is holy ground. The place where you're at is holy ground. So why? Why did he appear as a burning bush to Moses? And why is there the appearance of a warrior to Joshua? In both cases, with both men, they were about to do something significant. In both cases, they were about to, in the case of Moses, he was to deliver the people from Egypt. In the case of Joshua, he was to give the inheritance. He was to give the promised land over to the people of Israel. Why? And, I was praying and praying and praying, and I was, it's interesting that with Moses, a lot of the things that happened were very spiritual in nature. It was very... what Moses says, and I don't know if this is a right teaching or not, but it's interesting to me that with Moses says, Moses' response to the burning bush is, I must turn aside now and see this marvelous sight, why the bush is not burned up. Moses did a lot of marvelous sights. He asked God, he asked God a bunch of questions. How will they know? And God gives Moses several signs. One of the signs that God gives to Moses is that he would throw his staff down and it would become a snake, and he would pick the staff up and it would be turned back into a staff. Another of the signs was that he would put his hand into his coat and pull it out. It would become leprous, and put his hand back into his coat and it would be clean again. God gives his name to Moses, Yahweh, I am who I am. And then Moses goes on to do 10 plagues in Egypt. They're traveling through the wilderness and they come to water and it's not clean. And Moses does another miracle. There's the Red Sea. There's Mount Sinai. There's the staff where he's holding the staff up and they're winning, and they're pulling the staff down and they're losing. he makes a bronze serpent and he puts it up, and the people, when they're getting bitten by the serpents, there's a lot of like miraculous, wondrous, marvelous things that are happening around Moses. And with Joshua, it's not that there weren't those things happening, but a lot about Joshua was battles. It seems like with Moses, a lot of his job was to draw the people to God. And Moses' response is, I must turn aside now and see this marvelous sight, why the bush is not burned up. Joshua's response is, are you for us or for our adversaries? Moses is a one of drawing in, of coming near, of being in wonder, of curiosity, of wanting to find out more. Joshua's response is one of a warrior. So here's what the Lord touched me with this morning. And I was asking God, why? Why did you appear differently? And you know, God's name, I am that I am, it's the becoming one. It's apparently, I think it's present tense in Hebrew. He's the becoming one. What does that mean? It means if he becomes who you need him to be. And I feel like the Lord spoke to me this morning and he said, I am the becoming one. And you worry instead of letting me become who I need to be for you. And that's a big deal for me because I struggle with fear. If you've been listening to us, you know several days ago that the big deal was God showed me that my mission in life was to not make him angry. What is that to say? It's to say that I was afraid of how he's going to respond to me. And there's a good place for a fear of the Lord, but there's also a place where it's not. There's also a place where the kind of fear I'm experiencing, I'm not sure if it's healthy, because it transitioned me into my goal in life is just not to make God angry, when my goal in life should be to please my Father. My goal in life should be to see the smile of the face of my Father. And yes, be concerned about how he's going to respond, but not in relation to his anger, in relation to his smile. And maybe there's different times. Maybe there are times where, I know there's times where I need to be afraid of my dad and his anger. But I needed to hear that transition. God became a smiling Father to me. And the Lord this morning spoke to me and said, I am the becoming one. And you worry instead of letting me become who I need you to be. Joshua didn't need a burning bush. He needed a warrior. He needed the captain of the host of the Lord. Why? Because he's about to fight a battle. Do you know that if the captain of the host of the Lord, because here's the next chapter. Chapter 6 starts this way. Now Jericho was tightly shut up because of the sons of Israel. No one went out and no one came in. The Lord said to Joshua, see, I have given Jericho into your hand with its king and the valiant warriors. And then he gives him the instructions on how to take the city. Joshua's about to fight a battle. And so the captain of the host of the Lord shows up. Do you know if the captain of the host of the Lord shows up and then God tells you that he's going to give you the city, maybe the host of heaven is about to fight with you? If a general from a greater, much more powerful army shows up to you right before a battle, there's got to be a reason. I think God was showing up to Joshua, or if you think it's an angel, an angel. Either way, the Lord is speaking to Joshua, and I think he's sending Joshua a message. I am with you in this battle. My sword is drawn. I'm ready to fight. Today, allow God to become what he needs to be for you, what you need him to be. In the days of Moses, Moses needed a burning bush. In the days of Joshua, he needed a warrior. In the days of Abraham, he's sitting by his tent, and 3 men show up, and he recognizes one of them as the Lord, and he bows down to him. In that day, Abraham needed a man. not a warrior, not a budding bush, a man. He is the becoming one. He will become courage and hope and fire and power and comfort and fear and joy and strength. He will become what you need. Only let him become what you need, for often we don't know what we need. Let him become what you need today. Father, I just thank you for those that are listening today. Lord, this morning, we all need you to become something for us. We all need you to be something to us today. Maybe we're standing, but we're standing on sand and we need you to be the solid rock. Maybe we're falling in the dirt and we need you to be the hand that lifts us up. Maybe we're fearful and we need you to be courage to us. Maybe we're prideful and we need you to bring us low. Maybe we need a miracle, and you will be the miracle-working God. This morning, Lord, each and every one of us is in need. We are weak. Your word says that when we are weak, you are made strong. Please meet us, Lord, each one of us today. Be the becoming one, and help us, Father. Help us to let you be the becoming one. Help us to let you become what we need you to be. In Jesus' name, amen. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May he cause his face to shine upon you. Let's go out, weapons hot.